Afternoon, folks, and welcome into the Colour in Our Landscapes webinar, which will be presented today by leading New Zealand expert Di Lucas, who's beaming in from Christchurch to be with us. Hello, Di.
Hello.
Now, Di is a long-term friend of Resene, and in 2012, she was the recipient of the Resene Total Colour Lifetime Achievement Award. Di is also a registered NZILA Landscape Architect and a life member of the NZILA. The Lucas and Associates team have twice been awarded New Zealand's premier landscape planning award, should I say, the NZILA Charlie Challenger Award. And in 2019, Di was made an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for her distinguished work in the industry. I suspect all of you tuning in today will have worked with industry resources Di has developed over the years, with one example being the original colour steel palette, which Di designed in 1982. We should get time today for question and answers at the end, so please do type them in and we'll do our best to answer them if we get time. What we're going to do is crack into it now, and we'll turn our webcams off. So I'll get you to turn your webcam off there, Di. Now, I have control of the slides today as well, and so hopefully we can synchronize ourselves as we go. So
can I do an introduction?
Oh, sure, no problem. I'll turn mine off. Yep. Away you go.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko tititia, te mauka, whakaruru. Ko matao, te awa, whakaora, no terrace au. Ko ototahi, tōku kaika. Ko Di Lucas, tōku ikoa. He horonuku, hai whakahaere here o. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Well, it's wonderful to be here today, and as I've just said, I'm from Central Otago, from Mount Aspiring, down the Matao, the Clutha, and from Terrace, which has become a bit too much on the news lately. And so I am really pleased to present this today, because I'm from that inland dry country, but I work all around the country. So I'll turn my camera off and we'll turn the slides on. Right, Rob?
Yep, good to go. Thanks, Di.
Thank you. So Aotearoa New Zealand is such an amazingly special country. It is so diverse naturally, and it's primarily a rural country. So it's a precious country with world-class landscapes. Well, in my opinion, I'm a little biased, but in my opinion. But every town, every city, probably every suburb really has a context of some sort of natural significance. So we need, I think, in our work thinking about colours on structures in the landscape, we need to respect the naturalness of our landscapes and celebrate them and celebrate that diversity and its wonder. So next, first slide, Rob. So thinking about that diversity, many years ago, about in the 80s, I think it was, a kaumātua told me a whakatauki about the diversity of harakiki flower colour around New Zealand. And I always was fascinated. He said that there was a different flower colour on every mountain range. And I thought this was fascinating. So a couple of years ago, I suggested that be explored, and we had a lovely citizen science project and Forest and Bird and Resene involved in hosting that, and people explored the diversity of harakiki flowers. So there, so it's harakiki flowering season now, and found there is indeed a great diversity. And we got, I think, 76 different images from different flower colours around the country. Next. And when we looked at them and looked at them located into the different landscapes of New Zealand, and we saw the colours in each flower, each local area, it was wonderful. And so I thought there's a really interesting situation there to think about the diversity, and that's a seasonal diversity, that it sits within. It's not dominant in the landscape. It's not like a row of, you know, pink flowering cherries or something. It's, you know, it's quite discreet, but it's an important cue to the richness in our landscape. So I thought maybe we can take that further in our building palettes. Next. In the 70s, I worked for Ministry of Works in engineering division as a landscape architect. And when I was there, they used to paint all guardrails and guardrail posts white. They were tannalised timber posts, but everything got painted white. And then bridge colours, the engineer's wife was allowed to choose colours for bridges, and it was nothing to do with thinking about appropriateness in a landscape. It was very formulaic on all the infrastructure. So I challenged all of that, and I got a stop on painting all this infrastructure white that didn't need it for, you know, safety reasons and so on. And I remember the Kawerau Bridge here and the Kawerau Gorge near Queenstown. People might know it was painted primer pink at the time, and I got it painted possum brown, and it's still now they call it a heritage thing, but anyway, it's still possum brown. But that's it was a colour to respond to that schist rock country and that structure within it. And you know, a lot of the stuff can be quite timeless, and we can do it well to fit our landscapes. Next. So I resigned from Works, and I set up practice based in South Canterbury in '79, and then I got asked to run workshops for rural design. And then the Farm Forestry, I think it was, Farm Forestry Association and Fed Farmers, they got me to, you know, do talks and things. And then they asked me to develop a guideline for landscape change in South Canterbury. And so I did that. I produced a guideline booklet, Landscape Guidelines for Rural South Canterbury, first part in 1981 and then 1982. And to recognise, it did quite a bit on included building design and location and so on, but there was also planting ones and earthwork sections and so on. But in the built one, and I went to Resene, and they kindly made a chart. I chose the colours, and they printed a chart for me. And it's this thing that still holds today, that we need to think about the dark tone landscapes, the mid tone landscapes, the light tone landscapes through New Zealand. So these light tone landscapes were there in that limestone country you get through South Canterbury, then the mid tone ones and those sort of more lush of the plains and the downlands, the intensive irrigated, and then there in the dark tones into the forested country of South Canterbury, and they have quite different character. And so what I sought to do was to guide people to use darker roof colours and lighter walls, but within that sort of tonal ranges appropriate to those landscapes. And I mean, people still ask me for this guideline booklet so many decades later, but it had these sort of principles about looking at having muted colours, trying to make buildings look like they belong, that they nestle, sit down, that you group all of the buildings. Don't we so often see it? People spend so much money and effort on a house, and then they go and stick in a shed or something nearby, or even not so nearby, and it's, you know, white or light or totally unsympathetic to the house. So the whole thing about needing to address all of the structures together and to address them as part of the landscape. Next. So, you know, we did these guides, and I think that it all holds really well today. So choose that main colour, that main wall colour that blends tonally with the backdrop. Not that it's camouflaged, but that it looks can be part of it in terms of depth of colour, in terms of reflectivity, but don't try and match green. I mean, it's disastrous just trying to match up green to green, and we see there's awful blue greens around, and I'll mention that later. But then your roofs need to be darker to really sit buildings down into the land. In town and country, generally we need to hold them down. So that next year, I was asked by New Zealand Steel to go up from Geraldine to Auckland for the day to Glenbrook and to design a standard range. They wanted 6 colours for New Zealand. This is the first coloured steel to be produced in New Zealand, and they wanted 6 colours. And so I went around the room. They had 200 samples. I didn't have enough the colours I wanted, but I selected and got 6 colours, and that iron sand and karaka as the dark tone, lignite and scoria as the mid tone, and tussock and lichen as the light tone. And they're all still manufactured except tussock, which I am sad about because I think it would be very popular and useful today. Next. So if we look around New Zealand and think about those sort of base colours, and then, you know, been involved in some of the ranges since, like such as the Flexpod one now that's so popular, we think about looking at like a forested landscape, the dark tones, and how we can work with roof colours like in the karaka and the iron sand and the Flexpod, the darker tones that work well in those landscapes, and then those lighter tones that can be in the walls and so on. Next. And similarly here, you know, the wooded country, trying to relate buildings down into the landscape through having the darker roof colours, and then 10% or so lighter on the wall colours. Next. And here we have in Queenstown this one with the iron sand, although it looks in the photo a bit darker than iron sand looks in reality, but it fits in well, relating that darker roof colour back to the remarkables and sitting it into that landscape and with the timber cladding below. Next. And so, we lot through the centre of the South Island and here at Pukaki, at Lake Pukaki. I mean, there's amazing moraine and tarns. And if we're putting buildings into these landscapes, they need to be really respectful and not focal points, and they need to relate to it, and colour is a really important method of doing that. I'm sure you can imagine how the tussock colour would have worked well. And same here in the Hall Denarm there towards Lake Benmore. We need those darker tones wrapping down to the lighter tone walls, but then the trim, things like the spoutings and all the trim and the windows and stuff, trying to keep that darker, not too light, not becoming focal points. Because we have such bright light in New Zealand, don't we, that as soon as you have light colours, they stand out for miles. So here, the Kaurangi Valley one in the Coromandel with the prize-winning building by Herbst Architects, which isn't probably got no paint on it, is it? And it's all that wonderful merging into that landscape. Now that's, you know, a current thing, and how you know, it looks amazing, but a lot of people would prefer probably for their own place to have more of that tonal range and formal colour. But the rusted is a wonderful effect, and also can be applied in that artificial rusting techniques. Next. So if we come out to the lighter tone landscapes on our coasts, such as this wonderful building that Peter Kent did at Ship Creek down in South Westland, you know, here out onto the dunes with those lovely spinifex dune country and the very pale sand on that west coast, then you can have the very light colour building. And here with that hip roof that is very pale in colour, whilst it, you know, it stands out for miles, it's an information centre building, so it's appropriate for it to be a landmark, to be highly visible in that landscape. But generally for private buildings, we want to nestle them in. So using these, the principle of trying to merge to similar reflectivity to the background. So there's that tussock that I did in '82 and I would dearly love to see again. And I think we could apply that. We could apply that so well in a lot of our coastal landscapes as the lighter tone colour. Here's a Canterbury beach settlement in North Canterbury at Cleverley. It's just a wee guide we did years ago with looking at the development there and trying to get those colours that respond to that, to the underlayers, to the sands, the sort of colours of their sands, which are very different than the West Coast South Island sands, which are very different than the West Coast the Waitakere sand colours. So working with the local landscape, the colours of the rocks, the colours of the sands, the colours of the soils and of the vegetation, but not replicating green. Next. And then that was taking it through, recognising those into the district plan with the grey wacky of that stone of that place and the raw concrete is an important part of this landscape. Next. Yes, so in all of these, you'll see we got these different rock types around the country, so we can recognise them in these different sands and so on. And same with our rivers, we need respecting and celebrating the localness. Next. So in a more urban one, we've done various guides over the decades. In this one, for Sumner, you know, a community project, a full community workshop process in coming up with the layouts and the designs and so on for the future of Sumner. But it also included a colour palette that was developed to respond to the underlayers and the character of Sumner. And there's the details of the volcanic rock type and the colours that are appropriate for that, the browns and the grey greens, the different colours that respond and feel comfortable in that landscape. It doesn't need to be boring at all. You can still have liveliness in it, but it's just to build that respect to the local. Because I am concerned that now in a lot of places there's the utilities put on roofs, fair enough. And this one, on the left, the solar panels look wonderful on that roof. They're really sympathetically done. But what we so often seeing now is lighter and lighter coloured roofs, and I'm very concerned for especially our rural landscapes and our peripheral and near park land landscapes that are very vulnerable to very light colour structures, such as pale roofs, which are being used and promoted more and more. And I think we really have to be careful about this, as we end up with you know, a fly spot approach of, oh, it's the wrong term, you know, it's chucking light colour across our landscapes can be very, very intrusive. Next. So about 5 or 6 years ago, the Colour Steel called me in to work with architects both up north and down south, and a colour range was agreed, and then they asked me to name them again. I'd named the original ones in '82, and now I named these ones as well, to respond to our landscapes. And ones like Flex Pod, you'll probably know well, and we see Kowhai Glow appearing here. So Flex Pod and another one that I named Tidal Drift, they have both been produced also in a matte finish, which is great because of our bright light and our high reflectivity in terms of reflection of the shininess. We do have a problem in New Zealand of glint, you know, getting glinting places. So being able to have matte surfaces helps a lot to settle buildings into the landscape. So I'm thrilled that those ones have been produced, and really lovely for both in town and in country. There's iron sand on that tray, on the cladding on the wall. And here I'm just pop this one in, this urban one just down the street here in central Christchurch, involved in bringing those colours in that are colours of the Canterbury landscape, but this is central Christchurch. So those are the sort of tussock colours and the greys of the Canterbury alluvial country and the blues, and brought into town to be a recognition of that relationship, and not just be the puritanical grey and white. This is the current range from Colour Steel, and I just put this in because the bottom row I do have quite considerable concerns about, because of so often they can look wrong. Whereas back in the 82 range, I have scoria, you know, designed the colour scoria with a mid-tone colour, and that's, there it is there in the middle of the bottom, and that relates to both the nature of our place, I called it scoria, but also the cultures of this bicultural country, the barn reds of my heritage, and the whare reds that are so traditional in our landscapes too. So the scoria works well, and sits well in the landscape. But pioneer red really can be quite a focal point, and it sometimes, I think people use it thinking it's going to be much quieter than it is. And the greens on the right, the permanent green is the one that does concern me quite a lot, because it's a mismatch. It's such a blue-green. It's very uncomfortable in both in urban, but also very, very uncomfortable in the rural landscape. And the current fashion for sort of almost black and almost white, you know, I think we're getting a bit sick of that, aren't we? I know it's a high fashion, but oh, dear me, can't we get some colour back? Here, next. Because one thing we need to remember in New Zealand is we have a very high proportion of colourblind people. And sometimes when I see that permanent green use, I have to say my first reaction is, gosh, were they colourblind? Because people who are colourblind don't see green and they don't see red. That rainbow in the picture shows normal vision on the left and a colourblind version on the right that my optometrist supplied to me. Now he says, oh, a sparky isn't allowed. You know, you can't be a sparky if you can't see red and green. So I don't think colour designers should be like that either. So yeah, something we need to think about, yeah, more and articulate perhaps a little more. So we need to be careful about making exclamation marks in the countryside when it, and whether we want to think more about tucking in and settling down, because the darkness and the tone of roofing and trim makes such a difference to the nestling in factor. Next. This, sorry, it's a bit of a jumble. Back, yes, 2006, we did, there was a series of batches in Marlborough Sounds at Clover Bay that we did some design work for, and including painting up all these little old buildings, and they were all white. And we did this series, so I called them Cod Crib, Leaf Crib, and Rock Crib. And they've each got a suite of colours that of those themes. Now they're little buildings and they're quirky little ones, and they're in the same area, but they work well together with a diversity of colour palettes. So fitting in, nestling in, it doesn't need to be at all boring, but it just means generally avoiding the light and bright where it doesn't sort of tie things down. And in small buildings, they need to be simple. In Reefton, when we did this decades ago, we did a full plan with the community in Reefton, the coast's bright spot. It was the first place to have reticulated electricity in New Zealand, I think. And so as the bright spot, and the kids during the workshop did all the covers to the reports. That's what that cover is about. One of the kids did that one. Each person got a report with a different cover. But you'll see they've got a colour chart for different buildings in Reefton, and it's about being a bright spot. That it's a climate very different than our Central Otago climate. It's a duller. You know, it's more rain and everything, and they're having the bright spot and the life in a little town in that environment is wonderful. Yeah, but again, it's not about white and stuff, but it is about fun. So watching out for the fences and the trellises and all the detail, because so often they become a feature. As I mentioned, you know, the shed gets put in that's light or bright, but then often it's a fence or a gate or a trellis or, you know, some extra thing that then becomes a focus and is a distraction or a distraction, as I say. Okay, next. And the same with other utilities like these tanks. I mean, there's some awful greens on plastic stuff, isn't it? With a shade cloth, plastic tanks, all these sort of plastic things. Are awful blue greens that aren't very appropriate in many landscapes. And then back in Peel Forest, when I was in South Canterbury, we did a plan for the whole area up into the Mesopotamia, but we did some colour schemes for the Peel Forest area, with the community, and here's one looking at different options for their local hall. And it was really interesting exploring that with the community and what would excite them and what they'd enjoy. I was involved with the community in the Tarawera Lakes at Rotorua some decades ago, and then the council asked me to do the stuff for the district plan for them directly, and which I did, and then developed design guides and revegetation guides and so on for them, and got some and worked between the district plan and in guide documents. And so it was a good example really of trying to respect that local landscape. And when you do a thing like a district plan, that's going to be there for a few decades. So you've got to respond not just to the current immediate fashion, you've got to think forward and be adaptable for the future. Next. So we did these different guides and the rules, including things like the reflectivity values, so that the roofs are as light as 37%, but they need to be at least 10% darker than the walls. Next. And then, oh yes, things you'll see there in that second paragraph there, remember the linings to your curtains. So often, you see these beautifully finished buildings and lovely dark and mellow exteriors and trim and everything. And then there's these light coloured curtain linings. And especially in somewhere where there's lots of holiday houses and where the buildings might not be occupied a lot during certain sunny days, it can be very intrusive in the landscape. And so hopefully there gets to be more consideration of that in the effects, the external effects of things like the linings and the curtains. I know it seems a bit off topic, but yeah. So that general thing, yeah. So we did the guides there and they went right through so that they're publicly available, which was useful, and that I really have been thrilled at how they've been implemented. Next. And yeah, so trying to get people to think about the vegetation and the building forms, materials, colours, and working them together, which we did in those guides. And so it's been great, and a lot of these times working with community, it's so interesting to find that what spins the community's wheels on these things. So here in Christchurch and over at Littleton, there's a current project that's got resource consent now and has got some funding and getting underway, and it's called Collett's Corner, which has apartments and wellness centres and so below, and it's in the middle, Main Street, Littleton. And I was asked about the colours for the exteriors, and I said, well, it's where the ocean comes in, the marine comes in and meets the volcano. So the surfaces of the walls have done in a very faceted way in marine colours, and then there's a core. The core is all in the volcanic colours, and yeah. So I trying to get to understand these relating to place. So just as we did that citizen science flower colour exercise for the harakiki, I think it would be cool to pull these things into local areas. What's the harakiki colour in your area? The harakiki flower colour, and how might we interpret that? Not just in a grand wall artwork, which would be fantastic, but in a colour palette and in pops of colour and different things to celebrate our landscapes. Yeah. So thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Ty. That was fascinating presentation today. I'm sure that there'll be a lot of people out there like myself that are surprised somewhat about the impact that you've had on the world of colour in New Zealand, and that's absolutely fascinating to run through that and see what what you've had a massive influence on over the years. And amazing to see some of those colours and trends that are still with us from many years ago. And I guess that means you pretty much nailed it when you were developing these things. So now I've got some questions here that I've been taking some notes as we've been going. So I'm interested to know whether were you the pioneer with all of this, or have you been working? Are there others in the industry that you work alongside, or is this something that you feel like you've been the pioneer of and led the charge?
Well, back in Ministry Works days in Dunedin, architect Tim Heath was at the Dunedin City Council, and we together did a guide for the Maniatoto, just a tiny little guide, but about designing colours for buildings in the Maniatoto. I can't remember what triggered it, but that was the first thing, I think, because the district council down there at the time put out in their district plan, the colours had to be brown, green, or shades between. That was the legal language: brown, green, or shades between. And I thought, oh, goodness me.
I'm writing that one down. I'm just writing that down as we go. So I like that.
So we took it a bit further, and then Tim went off and did a study at Lincoln, and he did landscape architecture and did his major design on colours for buildings in the landscape. And then, yeah, I kept getting asked to do it, and it was really interesting getting asked up to Glenbrook in 1982. Yes, because I was out there doing the stuff with farming people. It was great. Yeah. Been around a while.
I'm also interested to know, do you look overseas for inspiration, or are you just really focused on our great little country here?
Yes, I'm focused on the great little country here. When I did that 82 guide, and the marketing manager and the manager of New Zealand Steel came to Geraldine to get sign off for the final palette, which I was thrilled they did that. And then the marketing manager went to Europe to see what was going on, and he came back and he was so excited. He said, we were right there, right on trend. And I hadn't looked internationally, I looked at our landscapes. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's about leading and not following.
Yeah, I'm not yeah.
I got a sense of that as we've run through today, that you're not a follower, Di. So that's great. What kind of trends do you see moving forward in colour, or are we really looking at some of those colours, and there's so much part of our culture, I guess now. Is it really only variations of what we've got now? You don't see any great changes to colour?
Yeah, no, we could do some different interpretations, just looking at making sure the depths of tonality are appropriate, but we can get into different nuances. That's what I was thinking. We could do quite different ones, so it doesn't feel, so things always feel like they're changing. I think that's important, but I do get bored with the black and white stuff. Well, it's not all black and white, but very dark and very light. And yes, I've said my bit about the green. Yeah.
Now, just on white, it's an interesting one that you touched on before around white roofs, and we're certainly seeing a focus on that nowadays. And I'm just interested to know how you feel about there's certainly a white roof movement globally. Around energy or solar impact and all that kind of stuff. I think even Bill Clinton was leading the USA white roof movement. So
I'm very worried about it. And when I saw that recent, was some new technology being discussed when they, you know, to have a white roof or some new finish, and it was going to reduce your temperature by 1.7 degrees. And they said that this meant all these countries won't need to have air conditioning. Well, 1.7 degrees doesn't make any difference, you know, that's not much, is it? And to me, if it would be tragic if we sacrificed New Zealand's, especially our rural landscapes, for that, because there's other ways of insulating and so on and doing things. We need to get ahead of that. I don't want the white roof trend in rural New Zealand.
Yeah, and we certainly do have technology to minimise that heat transfer through roofs. We have cool colour technology in our range, and certainly all of those, all of your colours that we've seen today, all the darker colours are available in cool colour technology, just to minimise the amount of infrared heat that's transferred through through roofs and any substrate for that matter. But
so that needs that information needs to be out there, so people don't need to think I'm going to be green. I mean, I don't mean the colour. I'm going to be environmentally responsible, and therefore I have to have a white roof. We want to get the message out there that that is not necessary. There are other ways of doing it.
Now, I've just had a really interesting question pop up from Cheshire. Thanks for the question. Is there ever a situation where a colour less respectful of context might be used?
Yes, there is. Again, it's like the landmark. We're justifying a landmark situation, making a structure be a landmark, but also there might be a heritage, there might be a situation that justifies it, but generally not. Yeah, there might be special circumstances that the building is so amazing, but it's got to warrant being a landmark, like a public place. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think that brings us to the end today, Di. As I mentioned before, that's been an absolutely fascinating presentation today. So thank you very much for taking your time out to take us all through that. For those out there wanting a copy of the presentation, please just email us direct, and I'll fire it out to you, no problem at all. If anyone does have any other questions, more than happy to fire those through to Di as well, and we'll come back to you with some answers. But yeah, once again, Di, thank you very much, and we'll sign off now. So all the best to you out there, and stay safe, folks, and bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.